On a good vibe though, Stevie. Right now, Chicago Action Fund is working to help create a bill to be the first state to allow prisoners to vote while they're incarcerated. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so Chicago Votes has been doing this kind of work now, this intersection between our justice system and our voting system since 2017. We started off doing work inside the Cook County Jail, where we would go in every month and register people there to vote. That led to us writing a bill and advocating for a bill that turned the Cook County Jail into a polling location, making the Cook County Jail the first polling location or the first jail to serve as a polling location in the country. This was huge for us. It re-enfranchised a ton of people. A lot of people in jail didn't know that they had the right to vote. But it's important to note that jail and prisons are different. Everybody in jail, everywhere across the country, has the right to vote because jail is where you go before you're actually convicted of a crime. You're being held there on pretrial detention. Us turning the jail into a polling location just made sure that those guys in pretrial detention actually were able to cast their ballot. Prisons, that's different. You know, prison is where you go when you've actually been convicted of a crime. And most people, or most prisons across the country, don't allow people incarcerated in prison post conviction to vote. There's only two states that allow people to do so, Vermont and Maine. And they've always been that way. In their constitution, they allow for people in prisons to vote. Illinois would, if we're successful in passing this bill, Illinois will become the first state to re-enfranchise people who are in prison, to actually go and give people in prison who currently don't have their right to vote through legislation, and we're advocating for that to happen.
Now, if this pass, are they going to get to vote for where they come from, or is it going to be where they're incarcerated? So, for instance, like judges, I know Chicago now, other people may not have aldermen, but you kind of get the question that I'm asking, because I know census-wise, at least I believe I know, census-wise, they're included in the census in usually those rural areas where they're being kept rather than where they come from. But how does it work if they're allowed to vote who they will be voting for, I guess I'm trying to say.
Right. So our team is kind of sorted this out in the legislation that we wrote. And essentially, what we landed on was people would be able to register at their last known home address. And so the ballot that they would be casting is a ballot in the community that they actually come from. This is important for a number of reasons. One, most people in prison across the entire state of Illinois are from Chicago. There are no prisons in Chicago, though. And so everybody's being taken downstate and incarcerated and completely separated from the community that they come from. And by making sure that people can register using their last known address, they can cast a ballot in the community that they come from, which is important. Most of them have kids there, families there. They care about like the communities and how they're being governed, because most people who go to prison do end up returning home. So giving them that say through the vote is really important to us. And then to your point around prison gerrymandering, which is that process of counting people who are in prison in the census in the community that the prison is in. Illinois actually just passed a law in the last legislative session that is going to change that. So already they're gathering the data to start counting people in the communities that they come from, not the communities that they're incarcerated in. Unfortunately, that won't go into effect until the 2030 census. However, it's good that it will ultimately go into effect at some point.
Look, to play devil's advocate, this isn't necessarily how I feel, but I'm sure people are asking this question. Why should people that are incarcerated have the opportunity to vote?
I think it's very simple. People who are incarcerated, lives are directly impacted by the people who are elected into public office. Um, I could go on and on about how flawed our justice system is. But one thing that I really want to point out is that 94% of people who are in prison were sent to prison on a plea deal. So they never got a fair trial. They never got to be tried by a jury of their peers. A lot of them took plea deals because they couldn't afford a private attorney to go to court and fight their case. And they were served this situation where they were like, we can take this to court and we can fight for it. And that could ultimately lead to you serving 25 plus years, or we can cop out at this plea deal where you're only going to have to serve 10. And so when you're in that position, it's kind of a tough sell to say, all right, I'm going to fight, knowing I can afford a private attorney, knowing that, like, not knowing what judge I'm going to get or the jury that I'm going to get, and ultimately having that risk of losing, serving 25 years when I could have taken a plea deal and served 10. And that's why you see 94% of people incarcerated are taking plea deals. That's a flaw in our justice system. Our justice system is determined by those that we elect, and the government that we as voters ultimately get to establish. But the people who are being the most negatively impacted by that justice system are not included in that fundamental right to vote, which is instrumental in establishing who the players are in the government that we all ultimately live under. Also, the politicians that are elected determine the prison conditions that folks have. And I don't have to tell you all, our prison conditions are extremely poor. They're inhumane. Solitary confinement is still a thing. You had guys during COVID, COVID ran rampant in our prison system, and there was no guidance or safety measures truly taken into place to ensure that folks were kept safe. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the elected representatives who are making these decisions over society do not have to worry about the people in prison, because the people in prison are not their constituency. They're not accountable to the people in prison. And that's why prison conditions and the livelihoods of people who are touched by our carceral system are usually permanently negatively impacted. And so ultimately for us, it's just a matter of making our democracy stronger. We ultimately have been fighting to make the democracy that we live in the democracy that was outlined in the Constitution since it was originally established. And this is the next phase of that. Our prison systems are extremely overpopulated. There's 2.4 million people in them in America. That's more than any other country in the world, which means that we disenfranchise more people in America's democracy than the amount of people who are disenfranchised in any standing democracy in the world. And again, most of those people are Black, brown, or poor. And if these folks, Black, brown, poor people, are the most negatively impacted populations in American society, I think we should be doing all that we can to ensure that more Black, brown, and poor people can vote. But instead, by way of our prison system, this population is still the most disenfranchised and has been since the establishment of the country. So we're just trying to make the world a better place, man, ultimately. And we're trying to make sure that more voices are heard, and so that more people can be held accountable by more people. And we feel like that's the best way for a people-driven government that has everybody's voices represented in it.
So how can we and everybody watching this help?
So follow us on social media at Chicago Votes. Visit our website, chicagovotes.com. Google the Unlock Civics policy platform, and you'll see everything that's going on, the work that we're doing. Call your local lawmaker. Right now, this bill that I've been talking about, Senate Bill 828, it is on third reading on the House floor, which means it just has to get voted on the House floor once. It'll get sent to the Senate floor. It'll get voted on the Senate floor. And if that happens, and we're going to be trying to make that happen over the course of 2 weeks in October, This will be in place in time for the November 2022 elections, and people in prison will be able to participate in the midterms. So call your state senators. Just Google who is my elected representative, and find out who that is if you're in Illinois, and call your state senator. Let them know that you support this. And if you just want to support Chicago Votes in general, we have a bunch of different ways that you can contribute to the organization. You can buy merch from our gas station, which is pretty cool. You could join our membership program, The Click, or you could just keep in touch with us and volunteer in whatever way you want to volunteer. We'll be going down to Springfield and lobbying. We still go into the jail and do voter registration. We do court watching programs. We have creative programming. We do programs in schools around the city. So any way you want to get involved and try to make civics in the state of Illinois and Chicago a little bit better and more representative of the communities that we all come from, we have that avenue for you.
All right, everybody, you heard what Stevie said. Make sure you follow Chicago Votes, find out who your senator is or representative is, and get on it so these brothers and sisters can vote and we can get some of these people up out of there.